From the Hindu Kush to the Rockies, a journey from Kabul to Colorado in community-led transformation, a memoir of resilience, advocacy, and transformation by Homayun Milad. Episode 28, The Reality of Grassroots Conflict Resolution in Afghanistan. Conflict resolution in Afghanistan is not a singular process dictated by state institutions. It is a deeply cultural, locally negotiated practice that has shaped governance and social dynamics for centuries. At the grassroots level, where formal legal systems often struggle to reach, communities have relied on customary mechanisms to resolve disputes, maintain stability, and uphold justice in ways that reflect their lived realities. Having worked extensively with subnational governance structures, I have seen firsthand how local leaders, elders, and informal councils play a decisive role in conflict resolution, often more effectively than centralized legal systems. In rural Afghanistan, conflicts, whether over land, resources, or social grievances, are not settled through courtroom litigation, but through dialogue, consensus, and culturally embedded traditions of mediation. At the heart of this process is the Jirga and Shura system, long regarded as the primary mechanism for conflict resolution across Afghan communities. A jirga brings together tribal elders and respected community leaders, allowing for open negotiation, careful deliberation, and collective decision-making. The strength of this model lies not in enforcement, but in its ability to reconcile differences in a way that preserves relationships, rather than breaking them apart through punitive measures. In contrast to adversarial legal systems, where rulings often leave one party resentful, Afghan conflict resolution focuses on restoring harmony rather than determining absolute fault. Yet, modern governance models have introduced new complexities to local conflict resolution. With the formalization of community development councils, CDCs, and district development assemblies, DDAs, the landscape of conflict mediation has had to adapt to a governance structure that encourages democratic participation and legal accountability. While many communities still prefer traditional dispute resolution, the integration of formal governance mechanisms has allowed for a more structured, inclusive approach to mediation, ensuring that marginalized groups, particularly women and youth, have a voice in conflict resolution processes. However, the presence of external actors in Afghanistan's governance reform has, at times, complicated the grassroots conflict resolution framework. International development programs have attempted to introduce Western legal structures without fully understanding how Afghan communities manage disputes, leading to tensions between formal law and informal customs. The reality is that lasting conflict resolution in Afghanistan cannot be dictated solely by imported legal norms. It must build upon existing traditions while making space for inclusivity, accountability, and modernization. Equally significant is the role of conflict resolution in peace building. In a country where decades of instability have fractured relationships between communities, grassroots efforts at reconciliation have been crucial in fostering long-term stability. Regional collaboration through DDAs has allowed communities to address historical grievances and develop shared development strategies, while CDCs have helped reframe conflict resolution as a participatory, community-driven process rather than an elite-controlled negotiation. Despite these advances, challenges remain. Power imbalances, historical disputes, and ongoing political instability still threaten the effectiveness of conflict resolution efforts. Land disputes, access to water, and tribal disagreements continue to pose obstacles to local governance models, requiring sustained investment in both traditional and modern approaches to mediation. The work of conflict resolution in Afghanistan is not about erasing disputes. It is about ensuring they are resolved in a way that strengthens communities rather than divides them. Weaving tradition, governance, and modern participation, a ground reality perspective. The rhythm of governance in Afghanistan has always been shaped by its deeply rooted customs, communal leadership, and the unwritten rules of engagement that guide relationships within local societies. Long before formal governance structures were introduced, Afghans governed themselves through intricate systems of trust, honor, and negotiated consensus, relying on councils of elders, informal decision-making bodies, and deeply ingrained social contracts to resolve disputes, allocate resources, and make collective decisions. These structures, while informal, represented the heartbeat of governance, ensuring that communities remained intact, even in times of upheaval. Yet, as Afghanistan has navigated modernization and institutional reform, The question has never been about whether traditional governance should remain intact, but how it can be integrated into contemporary participatory frameworks that strengthen democratic processes without erasing communal traditions. Governance models introduced in the past attempted to create formal structures to facilitate decision-making and local administration, but their effectiveness has depended entirely on how communities interact with them. For many rural communities, governance has always been a local affair, shaped by historical knowledge, relationships, and negotiated trust. When decisions emerge from the center, they only become meaningful when adapted to local realities, whether through tribal councils, village elders, or community negotiations. The challenge of grassroots governance is not whether institutions exist, but whether they are trusted, understood, and embraced as legitimate mechanisms of change. Trust is never automatic. Communities scrutinize governance reforms with skepticism, questioning whether they serve their interests or merely exist to fulfill external expectations. True grassroots engagement requires navigating these uncertainties, not with persuasion, but with proof. When local governance systems reflect collective input, when decisions are made through consensus rather than imposition, and when leadership is recognized through service rather than authority, then governance begins to take root in the reality of Afghan society. Modern governance does not function in isolation. It must adapt to the ways Afghans negotiate authority, resolve conflicts, and define leadership. The introduction of governance models aiming to formalize participation has strengthened local engagement, but their ability to succeed has been tied directly to their willingness to honor the wisdom of traditional councils rather than replace them. This balance between tradition and democratic participation has been Afghanistan's greatest test. The challenge has never been simply to modernize governance, but to do so without alienating the very structures that have upheld Afghanistan's resilience for centuries. Governance reforms have struggled against deep-seated skepticism, particularly when externally imposed models sought to override rather than complement existing social structures. Many Afghans have rightfully questioned whether governance reforms serve their interests or whether they reflect distant bureaucratic agendas disconnected from local realities. Despite these challenges, integration remains possible and essential. The future of Afghanistan's governance cannot be built by abandoning tradition, nor can it ignore the importance of democratic participation. True progress lies in the ability of governance structures to evolve in a way that strengthens both the historical wisdom of communal leadership and the inclusivity of modern participatory systems. Afghanistan's future will not be dictated by rigid institutional designs, but by the ability of its people to tailor governance to their realities, ensuring that modern participation strengthens tradition rather than erasing it. We'll continue this story in the next episode, so stay tuned.